And 3, 2, 1.
Hi, my name is Rabbi Daniel Wasserman, presently Rabbi of Shari Torah Congregation in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Do you want me to ask you a question?
It's up to you. I'll tell you.
Okay, I can ask you, what's your style? What do you prefer? Do you prefer me asking you?
Yeah, I guess that's easier. That way it'll break streams of consciousness.
Great, okay. So, introduce yourself and tell me, let's go straight to the hottest part, which is responsibility to an individual versus a community and vaccination. How do you feel about vaccination? Introduce yourself again and vaccination.
Hi, my name is Rabbi Daniel Wasserman, Rabbi of Shari Torah Congregation, and we're going to jump into a pool of not easy questions. But the question of vaccination, in my opinion, is a very easy question. One has a responsibility to see doctors. Why? Because the Torah says so. The Torah tells us, let me just shut this and we can start again if you want. It's already on.
Such a nice beginning. I love it.
Yeah, it's okay. The question of personal, we have a responsibility to see doctors, meaning to allow the natural process of healing, while at the same time recognizing everything comes from God. That's not me saying that, that's the Torah saying that. The Torah clearly says, V'rapo yirapeh, in the Parshat Mishpatim. So the Gemara learns from that when it discusses the responsibility of someone who injures another to pay for his medical care. So the Torah says that one is responsible in the natural order to go to doctors, to make the best available medical knowledge available to ourselves, and to see doctors and to heal in that way. While at the same time, the Gemara tells us that, the Talmud tells us that King Chizkiyahu, some call him Hezekiah, but that wasn't his name, King Chizkiyahu had what we might call a PDR, a physician's desk reference. It was a book of medical solutions, of medicines, of things that took away diseases, and he hid it. He took it away from the people because people stopped praying, and they started to think that it was the medicines that healed them instead of God. So like everything else, there needs to be a balance in life. But the starting point for health is the medical profession, recognizing that they're not always right, and that many times, 20 years later, they'll say, whoops, we changed our mind. But that's where we begin. And when it comes to vaccinations, one of the rabbis, the Tiferes Yisrael, called Jenner, who opened up the door with God's help to the science of vaccination, called him one of the great righteous people of the world because he took smallpox away from the world. We live in a time where, by the grace of God and by God's great kindness, we don't have to deal with debilitating diseases that in previous generations were potentially a death sentence or a jailing of an individual. I was once speaking to someone, and to make a long story short, I was talking to him about the danger of nostalgia. He was telling me how when he grew up, he was my senior, and when he grew up, it was a much better time, it was a much more quiet time. It was a time you didn't have to lock your doors, and I said, that's true, and I'd love that. But somehow you sanitized out of that report that polio was rampant. And in the summer, if one kid on the block got polio, every other child got locked in the house. So it's very nice that you think a previous time was so much better, but the Pasuk in Mishlei says, don't play that nostalgic game, because it's a fantasy, because we sanitize reality and then we go there. Thank God we have vaccinations today. And yes, each of us has a responsibility not to injure another. If we were able to live in our own little bubble, then do what you want and then answer to God. But we don't live in a bubble. So when you have a cold and you sneeze and you don't cover your nose, you don't cover your mouth, you are responsible for making someone else sick. If you don't vaccinate, that's your shtick. Personally, I think if you don't vaccinate, you really need to be seen by a mental health professional. And if it's because you think it causes autism, grow up. It's a fake. It's a lie. It doesn't happen. But what about the rest of us? What about the fact that you have a responsibility to live in society? You want to go into a cave and live by yourself? Go! I'll deliver the food, no problem. But the rest of us, you have to live within a society. And vaccination is an inherent, important part of staying healthy. Because God forbid, if you cause for someone else to get sick, what are you going to say to God when He asks you, why didn't you do what was necessary to take care of yourself, which the Torah demands, and to take care of someone else?
Excellent. Ah, loved it. I moved back because I didn't realize when I got this beautiful close-up of you how important your hands are in your expression. I wanted to capture them. So that's why I moved back. Yeah, so that's
now
why
you're
I
a film
back.
producer.
Yes, okay. So now you understand what I did. Okay, so can you talk a little more?
Thing?
Yeah. Oh,
And you'll edit this however you want to edit it.
sure.
When I was 10 years old, I was going to camp, and so I needed a certain vaccination. I got a DPT booster, and at that time it was not the attenuated one. It was, the full force. You get 104 fever for a couple of days, and guess what? I got 104 fever for over 2 months. And then I ended up in the hospital. And I had a big surgery that, truth be told, if they had MRIs, I probably wouldn't have needed. And it was a long saga. And initially, before they figured out that it was a staph infection of the psoas muscle, they thought it was a tumor in the kidney, and I didn't know this. They were measuring me for a pine box. And it all started because of that vaccination. I do not know whether it was something in the shot. I don't know whether the doctor, because in those days it wasn't throwaways in the 70s. Probably, since the shot was given right over here, and that's where the psoas muscle comes up, probably the doctor didn't sterilize the needle well, and there was some staph on the infection. Be that as it may, when it came time to take my little boy for his first DPT shot, I was a basket case. And I brought him anyway, because that's what you got to do. And I remember asking my mother, how do you go through life? One day your kid's fine, and the next morning he's sick. And she said, you don't think about it. But do think about it. Because again, we are blessed with this miracle of vaccinations that we take for granted. And when our child asks, how come you're subjecting me to all of this pain of a doctor coming with a needle this big? The answer is because I love you. And because that's my responsibility, living in God's world. And thank you, God, for the opportunity.
Love it. Can you talk to students a bit, because this is middle and high school students, about their responsibilities for their own body and about this 13, you're an adult, versus 18 versus 21? And remember to start with,
The question that each person coming into adolescence has to begin to deal with, as the person, the child, the young person, begins to deal with a lot of issues that he or she has to grapple with. So let's start with this notion that at 13 you're an adult. That's not true. It's not Jewish. There's no source in Judaism that says such a thing. It is an American myth connected to this silliness we call bar and bat mitzvah. In Jewish tradition, yes, at 13 you are required to do mitzvot. Yes, at 13 you can be counted to certain communal obligations, but you're not an adult. You're an adult probably when you're 20. But it certainly is the beginning of a road towards adulthood when one has to start thinking about things for oneself. And the Talmud reminds us, and Jewish tradition reminds us, that what I believe is the greatest challenge of adolescence, that the smartest thing you could ever do is listen and take advice and learn from people who are smarter than you. That's not, and the reason I say it's a challenge for an adolescent is trying to exert him or herself, both socially and philosophically and educationally and in terms of their intellect. The smartest thing is to say, there are people who know better than me, I'm going to learn from them. That is not to subsume one's identity and reality to someone else. That's to say, teach me. And then I will learn. And then as I go through life, I'll have a little more experience. I'll be able to make more decisions on my own, although we all need advice. The most important thing a rabbi needs is a rabbi. And that's the only way that you can answer questions and direct people with God's help, is because you ask. The reason the rabbi is the smartest guy in the whole shul is because he asks more than anybody else. So here you have a child, and in American law, the child at 18, or it begins a little bit before, but certainly let's call it 18, has legal responsibility or legal ability for oneself. But transitions in life don't happen the way they do in the cartoons, in the Popeye cartoons. So a switch goes off and suddenly night becomes day or day becomes night. It doesn't happen that way in life. In the prayers we say, Golel or mipnei choshech v'choshech mipnei or. God rolls the daylight away from the incoming darkness and rolls the darkness away from the incoming day. That's the reality of life. Slow transitions. And when you find yourself in a transition period, there isn't an easy answer. When do you make the decision? When do parents make the decision? When is it a collaborative decision? And when it comes to health, the reality is, once you're 13, 14, 15, you'll excuse my indelicateness, but nobody, when you go to the bathroom, is cleaning you up. You've got to do that. And you close the door, and here you have yourself. Yes, a child, hopefully if there's a good relationship with parents, has an educational relationship with parents with respect to issues of the body too. Or maybe with someone else. But you see what's going on, and you're responsible for what's going on. Suddenly, to some degree, you're responsible to eat properly. Parents can't make you do it. You're responsible to exercise. You're responsible to get enough sleep. You're responsible not to make stupid decisions like using substances. Whether they are legal or not is immaterial. Potato chips are just as dangerous as alcohol and drugs. The only thing is the effect is slower. And so you have responsibility, not as much as I used to do it too, not to have breakfast of pizza and potato chips. Have an apple with it. And that way you can be a little healthier. So the transition period that is adolescence, there is no one moment where you can say, okay, now you're responsible. Now your parents are responsible. You have to listen to them. You don't have to listen to them. It has to be collaborative. And it has to be with the understanding that it's a secret. We won't tell anybody. But you don't know everything. You think you do. But you don't. And you think that the way you look at life is so clear and unequivocal, and then life kicks you in the head a few times, and you realize, it's a little more complicated than that. And so you need advice. You need direction. Your parents love you and have taken you and gotten you to this point. Lean heavily on them. Where do rabbis come in? Let's not say the word rabbis. Where does Jewish life and Jewish law come in? And the reality is that Jewish life and the Torah and Jewish law governs every facet of our lives. God is expressed in the prayers, gives us a soul and gives us a body. And at the end of life, we have to answer and return it. You go skiing and you rent ski boots. At the end of the period of time, you have to hand it back, and they're going to look and see, are you giving it back to me the way I gave it to you? Well, Jewish tradition recognizes that to some degree we have that responsibility to God too. Our bodies are not our own. They are God's. Now, the cat's already out of the bag, the genie's out of the bottle in certain things, but in the early days of elective surgery, in the middle part of the 1900s, you can look in rabbinic responsa, there were great discussions about what surgeries are permitted, what surgeries are not permitted. Do we have the right to take our bodies and just cut into them because we feel like it? What's the line between, let's say, on one extreme, a cleft palate, that it seems we all agree that it is proper to intervene and to fix, and what, on the other hand, is the craziness of our society, where women get painful, deformative surgeries so that their feet will fit into stiletto heels that are too small for them. It's not so easy to draw the line. Those are two extremes that are relatively easy. Whether it's nose jobs or other type of surgeries or PEDs, right? to go decide that I want to hit a ball farther, and I'm going to affect the body in a way that maybe it wasn't supposed to be. So these are not simple questions in our time. With every gate that God opens for us in the medical world, it is a new room of question that is opened up. You may not know this, but transplants are a question. I'm not talking about organ donation. That's a whole different discussion, and I didn't say yes or no. I'm just talking about the question of transplants, because for a long time as transplants were being done, they were still considered experimental. And when do you experiment? When do you not? These are all very, very difficult questions. When it comes to questions of health, again, when do you make the decision? When do you not? It's a collaborative effort, but it's under the rubric of you have a responsibility, and yes, you answer to someone. You're ultimately going to answer why you didn't take care of your body or how you took care of it. And no, our bodies are not ours to do whatever we want with. There is a partnership in the creation of a human being. And the fact that God allows us to say this is just mind-blowing. There's a mother, there's a father, and there's God. And those three partners create this human being. And yes, we'll have to answer to mother, we'll have to answer to father, and we'll have to answer to God. Mother's first online, but we have to answer to everybody. And just to take an extreme and say it's my body, I can do what I want with it, is certainly not Jewish. It may be a philosophy to which you choose to ascribe, but that's not a Jewish philosophy.
How would you feel about someone who wasn't a congregant who wanted to ask you a question, and how would they reach you? What kind of questions would a kid come to you with? So introduce yourself again and your background.
Hi, my name is Rabbi Daniel Wasserman, Rabbi of Shari Torah Congregation here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And I believe any rabbi has to find a balance between responsibility to his members of his synagogue within the four walls of a synagogue, but on the other hand, is a teacher. And in the Talmud it says God taught you for free. I don't mean in the financial sense. I mean without the pathways of responsibility. God freely teaches. So you too, if you know something and if you have the merit to have good teachers, so you're responsible to teach someone else. Just as if you were walking along the road and somebody had a flat tire, you don't say, well, you're not a member of my congregation, so I don't have a responsibility to help you with your flat tire. So too, if someone has a question and you can lend your ears and you can lend your shoulder to shoulder the burden that they're carrying, then you have a responsibility. Obviously, it's not that simple always, because again, life is complicated. But I know that people come to me all the time. And people know that my door is open. There are many people from other congregations that come to me, which sometimes is a problem. Because sometimes you go to some other rabbi because you really don't have the guts to go to your own rabbi. And you're really trying to play the system. And that's not acceptable either. You know, you'll go to this rabbi because you think he'll give you the answer you want. That doesn't work. But the reality is that sometimes you need an outside perspective or a different perspective, or maybe somebody doesn't have a good relationship with a rabbi, or maybe, you know, their rabbi just left and the new rabbi didn't come, whatever it is. And certainly, you have every right to present yourself to a rabbi and say, do you have some time? Can I discuss this issue with you? And hopefully any rabbi, and certainly I would take it seriously, and to whatever degree he feels he can, he will answer your question. The reason I say to whatever degree he feels he can is every question exists in a context. And there's no such thing as a question asked without its context being understood. That context can be halachic, that context can be social, that context can be family, and it would be irresponsible to simply respond to the question without really knowing the context or being unaware of the context, because you could rock a boat with information that you're not aware of and cause more damage than good. It's a bit like a doctor. You know, if a doctor's walking along and sees someone who needs help, he'll help him. But it's not always that someone, a physician who's not, you happen to know a physician, but he's not your regular physician, he doesn't know your records, he doesn't know your history, to say, "Doc, can you answer the question?" Not always responsible to answer the question, because then you'll go back to your doctor and say, "Well, Dr. So-and-so said," yeah, but Dr. So-and-so doesn't know your medical history. So that's a long way of saying, don't be afraid to ask anybody. You have every right to explore, and anybody, in my opinion, who's truly a teacher and who feels the mission to go Blues Brothers on you, and young people, if you don't know what I'm referring to, your education is sadly lacking. You know, when you're on a mission from God, that means everybody. It means your congregation, it means your family and the extended family of the Jewish people, which comes first. And then beyond that, certainly, every human being and every person that comes under the canopy of God's protection.
How do you want them to contact you?
If you call my cell phone and I don't pick up, you'll get a message that says, "Hi, this is Rabbi Wasserman. You're welcome to leave me a message or send me a tweet or post something on Facebook or send me email or send me a carrier pigeon or stand down the block from my house and yell." There are many ways to reach me. I know I personally am easy to find, including any Friday night or Shabbos that we are home, which is usually the case. The door's open, walk in, you'll be fed, and at the table we talk.
Perfect.